Ever wonder what a loan officer actually does? Most people think we just quote rates, but that's about 5% of the actual job. Today, I'm pulling back the curtain on what actually happens behind the scenes, from the day of your first call to the day you close and finally get the keys. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Closing the Deal. My name is Sam Enright. And today, guys, we are actually bringing you a solo podcast episode. So Zach could not be here this week, so we decided to just go ahead and move forward with a solo one. And I kind of racked my brain a little bit about, what exactly I wanted to talk about today, what I felt might be a good topic to cover. And seeing as I obviously work on the lending side of things, I thought, a good episode would be to talk about what exactly a loan officer does, right? Obviously, I know that in previous episodes, we have covered pre-approvals, we've covered like the closing process, we've covered underwriting. And I think that that's probably given everybody a little bit of an insight into obviously what is, my job or a job of a loan officer. But I figured, why not dive a little bit deeper into the weeds of what it is that, we do on a day-to-day basis in this industry. And now, obviously there's every loan officer, works a little bit different, a little bit differently, right? So, we have loan officers out there that have been in the business a lot of years. They have big teams around them. And so they have, individuals who help along the process of, from point A to point Z. So, pre-approval all the way down to closing, they have different team members who maybe facilitate different parts of that loan process. And then you have other LOs who maybe are newer in the business or, are, you know, I guess, got a couple of deals under their belt, but don't necessarily do enough volume to have an entire team around them, right? And so, what does their life look like? And what does the life of a normal loan officer kind of look like on a day to day basis? And what is it that we do, to kind of help facilitate helping people get financing for their home? So, I thought it'd be an interesting topic to kind of cover with you guys, give you a little bit maybe deeper insight into what it is that we do every day. So, getting started, guys, obviously in the intro, we talked about what, from point A to point Z. So, what is point A, right? For a loan officer, where does the beginning part of the process start? And so that's going to be the first introductory call or the first introductory application. So, typically what will happen is, we will have clients who will reach out to us, via text, via phone call. Sometimes they'll just download our app and, submit a loan application without really talking to us first if they find us online or something like that. And so that first part of the job for us, right, is always going to be digging in and trying to understand our borrower, right? So, from that introductory call, we're going to ask, a plethora of different questions just to try to get to know you a little bit better, right? What it is your goals are, what it is that we can help with. That way we can best serve you, right? Because ultimately it boils down to you, the individual, and, we want to do the best job that we can. Everybody has different goals, everybody has different sorts of needs and things that they're looking to obtain in the lending process, right? You have some people, first time home buyers, you have people who are repeat home buyers, you have people that might be purchasing investment properties or a second home. And so each and every single one of those people is going to have different needs than the other, right? And so that's really where we get into the weeds, is in the beginning, and really starting to ask those questions to try to understand you, the borrower, and what it is that your goals are, and so how we can help facilitate that. And it really is just ultimately about listening, right? And just trying to gather as much information, because ultimately on our end, the more information that we have, the better we're going to be able to serve you, and the better that we're going to be able to help you, right? So, knowing what your budget looks like, are you looking for down payment? Are you looking for down payment assistance? What's your job history? Have you, had, multiple jobs? Have you been at the same job for the last 10 years? Do you have, what kind of incomes do you earn at your job? Or you earn base? Do you earn overtime? Do you have bonuses? There's so much different things that go into making up a a loan application, right? And so these are all very, very important questions to ask in the beginning. So in the day-to-day life of a loan officer, when we're talking about the progression of a new client, that's going to be step one, right? Is we're always going to have a conversation with them. We're going to set the foundation of what is it that you're looking to do? What are your goals and how can we help facilitate that? And that's where we get into the pre-approval process, right? So usually if we do an introductory phone call, we'll start to gather some of that information. Obviously, we'll end that phone call with, hey, let's get a loan application filled out. Let's get everything so we can see it on paper. And when I say paper, I mean, obviously electronically, not a lot of things are done on paper these days, but, that way we can kind of see, right? Because it helps to have the conversation, and it helps to see the loan application in front of you and kind of understand, okay, hey, this is this. And, here's the job history and here's what the credit looks like and everything from there. So that's going to be kind of where we get started, right? Is the pre-approval process. And at that point, we are going to ask as many questions as we can to, again, help, facilitate the process and make it, better overall for the customer. Our job isn't just to hand out pre-approvals. It's to help people figure out what's smart, what's realistic, and what fits their life. The right loan starts with the right plan. So guys, that takes us into kind of the next part of what we do, right? And so that's going to be kind of the behind the scenes work. And so ultimately, there are a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that the clients don't see, right? There is, the loan structuring. And then once you're actually in contract, there's communication with the title company. We have an appraisal department where they work with the appraisers and get everything set up there. It's communication with our processor, with our underwriter, everybody that kind of helps facilitate the loan. We are kind of the conductors of that, if you will, right? So it's our job to obviously stay in constant communication with all parties. That includes you, the client, that it includes your agent. That includes obviously everybody on our end that helps get the loan to the closing table, right? So, in the beginning, let's say you did fill out an application, we're into, we got the pre-approval done, we've already had all the initial questions, all the initial conversations, and we have a plan. We got you guys in the right, or we got you in the right loan scenario that you're looking for. And now we send you out looking for homes, right? So that's going to be kind of where we take a step back in the process as a loan officer. When we send a pre-approval, ultimately, we're going to get you either, if you already have a relationship with a real estate agent, or if you need one, obviously we have some agents that we worked with, we can put you in touch, that sort of thing. But ultimately, you're going to go out and you're going to start working with a real estate agent, if you choose, to kind of start looking for homes and what fits your criteria and what you want to make an offer on. So, really, we're not going to pick you back up until you get in a contract. Now, that doesn't mean to say, we do have clients that, if you need us to run payment scenarios, or if you have questions about certain properties, or if your agent's like, hey, I don't know about this one with your financing type, like, let's reach out to the lender, see what they think, everything that has to do with that, we're going to help in that process of however we can assist in getting you guys to the point where you're putting in a contract offer in on a home. We're going to help in that process, right? So now let's say you guys go into contract, right? What happens there? Because obviously from the previous episodes, you guys know that this is where kind of the real work begins for the lender side, the lending side of things. So, really we're going to start with the loan structuring, right? We're going to put together your loan. Once we get the contract, we're going to structure everything according to the property specific now, because obviously in the pre-approval stage, it's very general, very generic. So it's going to be based on a max approval, estimated taxes, estimated insurance, all that fun stuff, right? And now that we have a property, we're going to be able to structure the loan accordingly to that property, be able to get the right purchase price, the address, taxes that go with that property, everything like that. And so that's what we would kind of call like our disclosure process, right? So once you go into contract, we're going to work on setting up your disclosures, which is your initial pack of documents that you would sign in order to move forward with your loan. In that instance, we typically, our income review is already done. We've already reviewed credit, all that stuff. We try to get that stuff out of the way as early as possible to, make sure that we are putting you guys in the best situation. And so that usually is going to happen before then, but, we will go through, get some updated documents, make sure that everything's structured properly, make sure nothing's changed, and that how we have the loan structured is the same as, or we're in the same position that we were obviously when you guys were in the pre-approval process, right? So after that, we're going to get you guys into our processing department. And so once your disclosures are signed, we move the loan over to our processor. A processor, in my opinion, is kind of like a pre-underwriter, right? So they're going to go through the file. They're going to make sure that we have all the initial documentation that we need in order to submit the loan to the underwriter. They're going to go through, they pull a couple of reports. They make sure everything's in alignment, get everything for the file basically ready to be underwritten. They will problem solve. They'll double check everything. They'll double check the loan officer's work, make sure that, we're not on different pages right before we send this off to be underwritten. So if there's any questions that pop up, things that, maybe we structure the loan a certain way and they don't know why, or this is contradicting with this, obviously we'll have those conversations with them and work with them to figure that out, make sure that we, again, have the loan structured properly before sending it over to the underwriter. At that point in time, again, we're going to work with our processor throughout the transaction. So that's going to be one of the key people that we're in constant communication with, because they help facilitate, underwriting conditions once they come out and that sort of thing. So the underwriter, we send that off to them. They're going to review the file. At that point, again, we kind of, take a little bit of a step back as the loan officer. Ultimately, we're kind of just in a lull period waiting for the loan to be underwritten. So there's not really much for us to do, kind of communicate with the borrowers, just let them know, hey, we're going to be a couple of days here in underwriting. We'll get you guys an update as soon as we have. Now, the loan comes out of underwriting, and I don't want to get too much into all of this because I know that we've gone over this in other episodes, but, essentially, our part of the job is going to be, once that loan comes out of underwriting, we're going to now start working with the client on getting any sort of conditions that the underwriter is asking for. Obviously, we're going to make sure the appraiser is staying on time and on target with his appraisal return date. We're going to make sure title company is working on their title work and getting updates on that side of things. There's obviously a couple third-party things we need. There's things within our company that we need. And so really, we're just going to kind of stay on top of the team, as well as work with the borrower on getting what the underwriter needs. So that kind of process, once we're out of underwriting, that next 2 weeks while we wait on title, appraisal, all the underwriting conditions, that's probably going to be the busiest time period for a loan officer in the contract period, right? That's where we're going to be in constant communication with all parties. If there's any sort of addendums or things we need signed from the agent, we're going to reach out to the agents, have them get that stuff for us. We're going to be obviously in contact with you, the client, working on conditions, and then also, making sure that we're staying on top of our third parties to make sure that obviously we're meeting timelines and deadlines and goals. Because when you go sign a purchase contract, you're going to have a contract date on there. That doesn't necessarily mean that 100% we're going to close on that date, but as a lender, our job is to try to get the loan done before that date, so that, we're making sure that nobody's waiting on us, because, that's never a fun situation to be in on a lending side, because then you have to communicate with all parties that, hey, we have a delay. Hey, we're not going to be able to close here or on this time. And so, that's where, again, a lot of our work comes in to stay on top of all of these processes, make sure that everything is going smoothly. So, that kind of takes us into the behind the scenes work, the things that are kind of going on that you, the borrower, don't necessarily know about, because at the end of the day, we are communicating with you. Hey, here's the condition list. Hey, here's what we need from you. But there's a lot of things on the back end that are going on that you don't necessarily see. The communication with the title company, communication with the appraiser to make sure they're staying on their deadlines and making sure that they're getting things when they need to us. And then communication with the agents and everybody, involved, just in case, we're, running into, that sort of thing. There's a whole team behind every mortgage, and our job is to quarterback it, from agent to title to underwriters. We make sure that everyone is on the same page to ensure that your loan goes smoothly. So yeah, guys, that's kind of the behind the scenes work, or the managing of the process, if you will, right? And so, sorry, I keep putting my arms up and shaking the camera. So again, that is, that's what's going to happen on the backside of things. Sometimes when things don't go smoothly, sometimes when we have issues, it's also our job to be a part of that as well. It's our job to run to the problem. It's our job to communicate with all parties. And that's something, here at our company that we pride ourselves on, right? We always say communication first. That is our bread and butter. That's what we live by, is being over communicators. And so, we also are big problem solvers. Not every loan is going to be super smooth, close in 20 days, give me some pay stubs and some bank statements and we're good to go, right? So, some clients are going to need a little bit more work, just depending on all the different factors that are going on with income or credit or just those things, right? But that is our job, is to problem solve. It's to be there to help support the client. It's to be there to get this loan to the closing table to get you guys into your house. And so, the level of what goes on the back end is ultimately just going to depend on, client to client, basis and that sort of thing. And so, but that is kind of that would be the meat of what our kind of 20-day process or 30-day process from, initially doing your pre-approval, getting you out looking for homes, and then what happens when you go into contract. What does our backside look like, and what are we doing to help facilitate the loan and get it to the closing table? So, and then there's obviously the emotional side of the job. I think it's no secret that helping people and being a part of that journey is probably the most, special thing of all. And obviously, we have different clients from all different walks of life come and work with us, and we get to help people that are in just a plethora of different situations. Sometimes it could be a refinance to, help them, they have equity to tap into in their home, and they're going to pay off all their debt, and they're going to save so much money each month, right? That's an emotional experience for them. And that's something that we get to help be a part of, is save people, money monthly. That's a huge thing, especially right now. Obviously, you guys know the credit card, or maybe you don't know, but the credit card debt is into the trillions at this point for consumer debt across the nation. And so, those are pain points for people. Or it's one of those things where, you have clients that we worked with on credit repair, and when they first came to us, they were not in a position to do so, and we gave them a plan and we helped them, and they went executed that plan, and now they're, in the mid 600s, high 600, low 700 credit score, and now they're able to buy their first house, right? And so there's an emotional side of that as well. And so, that I think is probably, again, the biggest thing for us is being able to be a part of just everybody's journey, and everybody has a different journey, and getting to help those people along the way. And so, and then that's not to say there doesn't come with negative emotions, right? On some of the sides, when you have some of those deals that, are troubling, or, do need a little bit of extra work, and are, kind of tough to get to the closing table. Those ones are, can be stress induced for you, the loan officer, for the agents, for the client, and ultimately, the way that I look at it is we try to take the burden off everybody as much as we can. We're going to obviously, again, do everything that we can in our power to, help you guys navigate through those waters, and try to absorb the stress ourselves and put it on us to figure it out. Obviously, stay in communication with you, but, keep it to the point where we try to still make it, again, an easier process and less stressful for the client themselves. So that's, I think, one of the most important things about this job as a whole, is just the people that we get to work with, the impact that we get to make, and the help that we get to provide along the way. So again, ultimately, that's where I come back to, and I think that is the best part of the job, is helping people, getting to know their stories. And especially when, again, when you started the pre-approval process, and like I mentioned in the beginning, we ask a lot of questions. We get a picture of what is going on in this individual, or this couple, or this family's life, and how we can help with that. It's almost a transformative experience going through that, and just seeing, what that means to people when they do get to the closing table, and how much, confidence and just, boost that they get just from doing this amazing thing by buying this house, and feeling like they're setting their family up, or changing their situation, or whatever it is that, everybody, again, has individual goals and individual things that they're looking for. But I think that is the best part of the job, and, getting to help people, and going through that journey with them. So yeah, guys, I mean, looks like we're at about 25 minutes, a relatively short episode today, but I thought it would be kind of cool just to, give a little bit more insight into what it is that I do, or we do as loan officers. And when you guys are working with your lending company out there, kind of understanding a little bit more in depth as to what they do on the back end, right? Because it is not just about quoting rates, or, whatever it is people think that loan officers do. There's a lot of work that goes into it on the back end, once you do go into contract, and all the facilitating that goes on. And it's a very fulfilling, rewarding job, obviously, like we just talked about, just kind of in the, the emotional phase, and what you get to do and help people with. And so, hopefully just a little bit of a deeper insight into that, for anybody that is just curious, or maybe anybody who's considering the career path themselves, and what that looks like, and maybe interested in getting started themselves. I don't know, obviously, out there, but that is, that's my main takeaway. So yeah, guys, hopefully it's a good episode. Apologize for the short one. So great episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed learning a little bit more about what it is that we do on the back end from the loan officer perspective. Again, we appreciate you guys tuning tuning in to Closing the Deal. We are nearing, well, at the time of this recording, by the time it comes out, we'll have been, a full 10 months into podcast episode. We're creeping up close to, I think we're going to end the year with 52 posted podcasts, which is very, very astounding to sit here and think about, because it was about this time last year that, Zach and I had the idea of, hey, man, maybe we should start a podcast and just kind of talk about what we know and talk about the things that, matter to us and we think are important for people to know when they're, starting this journey. Right. And so it's been very rewarding. It's been very awesome, very humbling experience to, you know, embark on this journey and just appreciate you guys, ultimately you guys tuning in, you guys listening to us and, watching our content, sharing it, all of that. So really appreciate you guys again. And yeah, this episode will be coming out here shortly. So we will catch you guys next week. It's always a pleasure. So we'll see you guys later. Have a great one.